even I, as a priest, don't speak about Jesus enough, because you can get caught up in the works of God instead of focusing on God. That really hasn't been my experience. That it's not because I don't feel an urgency, and I'm sort of identifying two different times in my life. One, when I was a seminarian, and I realized, to my great chagrin, that I felt like saying faith-filled words were awkward. And I don't know why. I was overwhelmed with this sense of awkwardness. I had left everything to go to the seminary, and it was when I was in college. I was clearly a believer. I clearly believed enough to drop my nets and follow him. I intended to be a preacher for the rest of my life, but I, honest to goodness, felt so awkward saying the word Eucharist out loud, because it seemed like such a foreign concept to so many people. I felt weird saying the name Jesus out loud. I would substitute other things. And I began to notice this, and I really never pinpointed a reason other than a direct attack from the enemy, that he doesn't want us to say those things out loud. And so he preys on whatever it is in that person. And for me, though I am generally speaking an extroverted person, I have like these moments of overwhelming shyness where I'm like, oh, please, nobody look at me. Nobody, I don't want anything to do with any of this. Yeah. And I think he played on that in those times to say, if you start using weird words like Eucharist and salvation and Jesus, people are going to look at you. People are going to think you're weird.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't because of any like lack of motivation to evangelize. Right. Like I was preparing to give my whole life to that. Mm-hmm. But there was this hesitancy to use the words, to say them out loud. Even amongst people that I knew and loved, it was awkward to talk about that with my family members for some reason, who are all Catholic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I noticed that after I got married and started to have kids, that while my wife and I got married in the context of an active Catholic life, and we were agreed upon that, and we were on the same page about how we wanted to live our lives, still, even within marriage, or perhaps especially within marriage, when I began to realize, oh, I have a particular role as a husband to kind of take the first step in that awkwardness. Even though my wife in many ways is better at that than I am, she's better at initiating prayer, she's better at sort of just speaking kind of freely about her faith, that I had a special role, especially as a father to my children, to be the one to sort of step out there and embrace a little bit of the awkwardness that comes along with that, of praying out loud or speaking about my relationship with Christ. And so I encountered that a little bit and wrestled with it. But I also so there's that part of it in terms of like speaking about it with people that you are already in relationship with, or have those conversations opened, and it's just kind of a matter of getting over that hump.
Do you think there is something though about like people don't expect men to talk about those kind of things?
Yeah.
Because I guess I've noticed as well too that I meet a lot of new people through the years in my ministry, and from time to time when men will come up to me to introduce themselves to me for the first time, they'll say like, well, what kind of things can we talk about? Do you like sports? Do you like fishing? Do you like... And I'm given a list of pre-approved manly topics to be able to talk about. And I mean, through no malicious intent or anything, but they're like, which of these menu of manly things can we connect on? Mm-hmm. And religion is not usually one of them.
Yeah.
So I think going back
they say to the priest.
Yeah. I think there is something about our Catholic culture that we have to be concerned about, though, because I feel like when I was brought up, the way that you felt very much was the way that I felt. And I remember going to a little town called Immokalee, Florida, where I worked with immigrants for a year. And I met an evangelical named Sinclair Williams. He was from the Caribbean, just big bear of a guy. And every time I would see him in the grocery store, wherever it would be, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Hey, Pete, how you doing, Pete? How's Jesus treating you, Pete?" And I'd be like, dude, I don't talk about Jesus in the supermarket, Right. It was this sense of, that's not who I'm called to be. When in actuality, like that's exactly, no matter your personality, that's exactly who you're called to be. Like in Evangelii Nuntiandi, Pope Paul VI says, we exist, the church exists to evangelize. Mm-hmm. Like that is the primary motivation of our life, because of the urgency of heaven versus hell. And I think for me, Father, it's been a journey of trying to get over my own ego. I mean, even to this day, I have to like get over myself and not worry about, well, is that person going to foresee me as like a religious zealot? Am I going to be painted in that certain picture. Like, I can't allow that to concern me. I just need to share Jesus, because at the end of the day, that person could die on the ride home tonight or whatever it may be. So I want to make sure that in a way that is following the Holy Spirit, that I am attentive to sharing Jesus if I have that opportunity. And I think there's more oftentimes than not where I've had that opportunity and I haven't taken it because I'm too afraid of, is this the right moment? How's it going to come out? How am I going to look?
And that's the side of it that I think I wrestle with the most, in the sense of, like, I have gotten over the hump a little bit, at least in my marriage and my friendships, where it is much more natural, amongst my friends, with my wife, even in front of my kids, to take that first step and, not just have those conversations, but even initiate them. But what I really struggle with is I do see other people who, it seems to me, perhaps by temperament, but perhaps maybe just because they're braver than they're able to just, like, out of nowhere initiate these conversations. And I kind of sit there like, how did they do this? How did they go from, like, ordering their ham sandwich at the diner to, like, praying on the ground on their knees with this lady who, who was taking the order? Like, and so sometimes then I wonder, okay, do I just stay too comfortably in my comfort zone? Like, what are the opportunities? Is the opportunity just because I happen to be with somebody? Because I'm often waiting around for the right. I'm waiting for them to be interested or to bring up a conversation that I can steer in that direction. And I'm not sure. I don't know how to discern.
I don't want to turn this into therapy, but are you overthinking it too much?
I'm probably a little bit, but again, it's brought
always looking for the right opportunity is sort of, that's a sort of like a taking control thing. So Pete was saying before, I want to be guided by the Holy Spirit. So just sort of being a little more in the Spirit, there's freedom to speak about these things, right?
So what brought it into sharp relief is I had an elderly family member die recently. And so that question haunts me just ever so slightly. Like, I never really got her. Like, I always hoped that conversation would happen. It never did. And do I bear any responsibility for never being more proactive about actually getting to that point where somehow I bring it up and have that conversation with them?
I think Pete was right to say that it's really all rooted in pride eventually, but what isn't? There have been times in my life, I'm clearly very over that now in almost every way, that I didn't want to be known as the Jesus guy. That's not the reputation I wanted to have. I was pleased to love Jesus. I was pleased to follow him. I was pleased to talk with him with anyone who wanted to talk about him. But, if you initiate those conversations, you're the Jesus guy then.
Yeah.
And there was part of me that didn't want to be known for that. And that has to be rooted in pride, because, I said the evil one would use my shyness, but really in a twisted way, because when I'm talking about Jesus, I'm not putting the spotlight on me, I'm putting the spotlight on him. And perhaps sometimes I would rather just talk about me and the things that make me interesting. But I think that is rooted in pride and not wanting to be the Jesus guy. Yeah. And when I sit back and think of it, I'm like, is that the worst thing to be known for?
Yeah.
For a Christian?